Last year was $152 billion of help available, and it was made up of these different programs here. The employer-paid tuition programs made up about 5%. Federal loan programs made up about 41%. Private sources about 2 to 3%. Federal grants 13%. The state's 8%. Tuition tax credits 9%. And then the VA at 3%. But you see this orange piece of the pie, the college resources at 18%. This is really what I'm going to be focusing on later in the presentation, because this 18% probably has more to do with what you're going to wind up paying for college than any of the other pieces of this pie up here. How do they determine if you are eligible for these different types of money? Well, really there's 5 different factors that colleges are going to be looking at when they're deciding what students are going to get what money. Number 1, need of the student. Number 2, performance of the student. Number 3, the uniqueness of the student. Number 4, the school's own needs. And number 5, positioning of the student. Let's look at these each in a little more detail. First of all, what is need? Well, need is defined by the overarching equation that drives the financial aid process. And that is COA minus EFC equals FM. COA is cost of attendance. And we already talked a little bit about that. That can vary anywhere from $5,000 to over $50,000 a year. EFC is the expected family contribution. Mentioned before, you fill out a FAFSA form, it gives you back an expected family contribution. When you take that number away from cost of attendance, that gives you what is called family need or financial need. And this is the number that you are looking for the colleges and the government to help you out with. So for example, in this equation, let's say you have a cost of attendance at that school of $30,000. You have an expected family contribution of $10,000. $30,000 minus $10,000 equals $20,000. So you're looking for help with $20,000. What is performance? Well, performance really is made up of 3 different factors. Number 1, college prep GPA is the first thing a lot of these schools are going to look at. And that is, what was the student's grade point average in math, sciences, English, languages, and other specifically college prep subjects. Second, ACT and SAT scores, the standardized test scores. This is the second item that the schools are going to look for. And one thing to keep in mind is very few colleges anymore really have a preference of the ACT over the SAT. So don't really get hung up on which one particular you're going to be taking. The schools out there, the high schools, typically are going to favor one or the other. So just go with whatever the high schools are taking the student class through. Overall GPA is taking a look at everything else that the student does in high school and incorporating that in with the college prep GPA so that they see what that holistic GPA is, and which is typically the number that you're going to think about when you hear the term grade point average utilized. Uniqueness. Some schools will pay for diversity, and that diversity can take on a whole host of different looks. A lot of schools will pay for geographic diversity. Maybe there's a school out in Oregon that they don't have anybody from Iowa or Illinois in their student body. So if a student comes in from Iowa or Illinois, they may put a premium on that and actually come up with more money in the financial aid program or in their financial aid offer to get that student to their school. Diversity also means ethnicity. Whether you're African American or you're Asian or you're Caucasian, some schools will put a premium on the ethnicity of the student which is applying to the school. Some schools will put a premium on first generation students. If your family's never sent anyone to college before and you're the first one to go, very often you can get extra money for something like that as well. Diversity takes on all kinds of different shapes and sizes. But the important thing to know is very often schools will pay for it. What does a school's need? Some schools sometimes look for specific students to fill particular needs that they may have. Maybe the school is starting a new program of study and they need to get students into that program of study to make it worthwhile. Sports is probably the one that most everybody would think about in this respect. If you've got a great athlete and the school is looking for that kind of an athlete, they often will come up with money to get that student there. Musical talent is another. Alumni ties, designated funds recipients, where that one really is somebody has given money to the school, they want it to go to a particular type of student. Positioning is very closely linked to performance, as I mentioned a little bit ago. Basically, you're looking, how does that student rank compared to the other incoming freshmen? If that college is bringing in, say, 700 new freshman students this year, the students, or let's make it even easier. Let's say they're bringing in 1,000 different new freshman students that are coming into the college that year. Very often they're going to pay more for students towards the top of that class, say 250 and above, and they may come up with less for students that are in the bottom of that class, 750 down to 1,000. Rank at different schools is going to be very different for each student. Just because your student ranks highly at one school doesn't mean they're going to be ranking highly at another school. And this is really, it's a critical aspect of a sound college selection strategy. This is one place where I'd like to highlight as well that we have an upcoming webinar just on the college selection strategy alone and the critical aspects to make certain that your student is selecting the right schools for them. Where to get the money? Well, there are really 4 big places out there to get money: the federal programs, the state programs, the college's own programs, and external scholarships. Let's look at each of these in succession. First of all, the federal programs. Federal programs include the Pell Grants and the Supplemental Education Opportunity Grants, or SEOG, Stafford loans, both subsidized and unsubsidized, Perkins loans, PLUS loans, and work study. Now, the Pell Grants and the Supplemental Education Opportunity Grants are free piles of money really designed for students with low expected family contributions. You can think of this as lower income students. Stafford loans are loans which pretty much every student is going to get if they fill out the FAFSA form. And quite often you're going to see subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Subsidized loans work pretty much the same as Perkins loans, which are a little less common. But the subsidized and the Perkins loans are no interest, no payments due while the student is in college. Unsubsidized Stafford loans are the interest accumulates while the student is in college, but no payments are due while the student is in college. Now, these loans here, Stafford loans and Perkins loans, are probably the least expensive monies any student can possibly borrow to be sending off to college. And therefore, I always recommend that if you want your student to take at least part of the responsibility for their college education, these loans are the place to start. PLUS loans, parent loan for undergraduate students. These are loans which go directly to the students, not the parents. And these loans are credit-based loans. I'm not really all that crazy about amongst work study. Work study is a great program. It is a program where federal dollars go to help pay for part-time jobs on campus. And those jobs can be pretty much anything you would expect that a college student might be doing around a college campus. They might be working in the cafeteria or stacking books in the library. They could be manning a desk at a dormitory reception area. Just about anything you could imagine. They're designed around the students, 10 to 15 hours a week. Now, some parents and students might be a little bit afraid of work study. You might be thinking, do I really want my student taking on a part-time job for their first year in college? Are they going to have the time to commit to their studies and a 10 to 15 hour a week work study job? Well, here's some information you may find helpful in figuring that out. From a University of Illinois study of typical college freshman week. This was done a couple years ago. That week, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, is 168 hours. Now, out of that, they sleep 35 hours. They go to class 15 hours. They're studying 13 hours. Their school activities are 5 hours. Their dependent care is 2 hours. Commuting 4 hours. And socializing 12 hours. Which means that out of that 168 hours, once they've gone through and done everything that a standard freshman is going to do, they have 82 hours a week left over. 82 hours a week to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. 82 hours a week to get their laundry done. 82 hours a week to twiddle their thumbs or play Xbox, or 82 hours a week for a 10 to 15 hour a week part-time work-study job. I would tell you, don't be afraid of work study. Now on the FAFSA form, you're going to see a question on there. It says, do you want to be considered for work study? Always answer yes to that question. Now, if it comes around if you're offered work study in the financial aid offer later on, you can turn that down once you've gotten closer and you have a better handle on what it's going to take of those particular schools. But if you do not indicate that on the FAFSA form, you will never have the opportunity to make that decision later. So always, always, always answer yes, you want to take advantage of work study if it is available to you. Also, a little information here on the Stafford loans. The Stafford loan rates 2009 and 10 were 5.6%. This past year, 4.5%. Next year, 3.4%. And then the following year after that, it is scheduled to go back up to 6.8%. This is for the subsidized loans. Stafford unsubsidized have always been at 6.8. Now, the reason is that under the last bill that went through Congress to reauthorize the Stafford loans, they established this interest rate schedule for the subsidized Stafford loans. Now, I assume that sometime coming up here in the year that Congress is going to reauthorize the Stafford loan program again, and they're probably going to go in and adjust these interest rates accordingly. There are limits on how much money that a student can borrow on Stafford. For a dependent student in the first year of college, they can only borrow $5,500 a year, $3,500 in subsidized, $2,000 in unsubsidized. For second year, $6,500, years 3, 4, and beyond, $7,500. Now for independent students, those limits go up, $9,500, $10,500, and $12,500. And then at the graduate level, they go up even further at $20,500. Basically, they have designed the system that they don't want to give a brand new college student enough rope to hang themselves. And as the student moves through college, proves that they're responsible, then they will give them the opportunity of borrowing more money from the Stafford program. Also, there are lifetime limits to how much money a student can borrow. Undergrad dependent student can only borrow up to $31,500 during their lifetime. Undergrad independent up to $57,500, and then graduate students, it's actually broken up there, as you can see, between health professionals going in, say doctors going to med school, and then everybody else in graduate school. State programs. States will often have special programs for in-state resident students. That means once you cross over a state boundary, say that you're going from Wisconsin to Florida, a Wisconsin student cannot expect to really participate in the state programs down in Florida because, frankly, you haven't paid taxes down there. So they're not going to have these programs available for students that somehow haven't paid into it. Now, these programs are often going to target specific minorities and specific professions. How you find out about these is check with your State Department of Education or check with the colleges that you're applying to, or also you can check with the high school that your student is at. Collegiate programs. These are very, very important. Now, particularly the private colleges, they have got development departments with big endowment funds. And these development departments are professional fundraisers, and their job is to get out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, beat the alumni bushes, and rake as much money into these endowment funds as possible. And they get some very significant dollar amounts within these funds. In fact, the largest nonprofit fund in the world is Harvard University. Now, this is the big reason why the private colleges often have more money to go around per student than what the state colleges do. And this is the big reason why that often you can go to a private college for about the same money, if not less money, out of your own pocket compared to the state colleges. Now, these schools are often going to give preferential treatment to the top 25% of the incoming freshman class, and this again is where that student positioning comes into play that we have mentioned earlier.